Hello all, welcome to Shatter Our Souls, where today I'm making good on a promise I made, I guess it would have been a week ago now. And we're going to be discussing the most dangerous thing in all of Metroid. Now, as stated, all of Metroid, yes I'm using footage from Prime 4, but that does not mean that this is exclusive to Prime 4. So, I suppose the first question is, what are possible runner-up candidates? And in my mind, Samus, Metroids themselves, even the X-Parasite, Phazon, Dark Samus, and whatever green energy ends up being are all candidates for being the most dangerous thing in Metroid. But I feel like the answer is actually much more philosophical than that. And it starts with a term called hubris. Now, hubris is often referred to as excessive pride, self-confidence, and or arrogance. It is described as pride that blinds. It causes or is the source of an individual misstepping, ignoring warning signs, or outright leading to their own downfall through arrogance. And I really like this as a general talking point within Metroid because the sentient individuals in all of Metroid have this habit of either too much caution or absolutely none. So, starting off with, I guess, Metroid Prime here to kind of point in this direction. Metroid Prime had a kind of a twofold problem. First was the Phazon problem. Second was the space pirate problem. So if you look at it from one perspective, the Chozo understood the Phazon problem. They said, yeah, okay, we have an issue, we would like to fix it and work on this together. And their option, because they didn't know how to eradicate Phazon, was to try to steal it away. They figured somebody sometime down the line would understand how to fix their problem. Didn't know who, didn't know when, only that it was a possibility. These guys actually made what is arguably a very good decision, as without the proper safety measures, they would have just fallen to the Phazon in and of itself. But the space pirates in this particular one are the ones that really intrigue me. See, it is shown through their arrogance, through their lust for power, that they're constantly making decisions that put themselves and others in harm's way. And you can actually see this in the Space Pirate data logs in Prime 1, stating that they have found ways to augment themselves to be far more powerful, but they also become more erratic. Their lifespan has been halved, but they don't care about that. They see themselves as super soldiers that are opting to be the king of the ring, the individuals who will bring the space pirates to a new era. Now, I like this hubris thing as a result of how it comes about. They're arrogant. They don't think about what the possible repercussions are. And so, they fall to it, or at least in part, and expose more of Talon 4 and the galaxy to Phazon as a result. Fast forward to Prime 2, we have the battle with the Ing. Now, the battle between Samus, Dark Samus, the Luminoth, and the Ing basically boiled down to this. Samus is trying to get off-world. She understands that the Ing, or the multi-world problem, must be solved before she can leave. This is fair. The Luminoth have been fighting a war against the Ing for all of 50 years. And this 50-year time span, they developed technologies that would help them fight in this battle. And for the most part, it was absolutely fantastic. It did exactly what it was intended to do. But as time went on, the Ing developed abilities the Ing developed abilities that allowed them to take over the technology of the Luminoth, to effectively turn the greatest asset into a weakness. If it weren't enough, the Ing developed No, correction. The Luminoth developed the energy transfer device. Effectively, what this device does is harness and then redistribute planetary energy. And on its own, beautiful device, fantastic, 10 out of 10, would not change it. But they made a fatal flaw in that it can be used against them. And so they were gearing up for planetary devastation, the complete collapse of their dimension. And yet, they had nothing to show for it. They felt, well, they were dealing with their entire civilization being destroyed because an item that they had, that they made, was used against them. This wasn't an insistence of arrogance or anything of that nature, but there was no caution to it. There was no what if behind it. They didn't think about what could have gone wrong. Now, Prime Hunters does take a little bit of a turn otherwise. Metroid Prime Hunters, each of these 7 hunters that ended up in the Alembic system, were there because of the belief or understanding that there would be ultimate power and that they wanted it before anybody else would. This is arrogance, this is pride, this is belief that they deserve this power. And while I personally believe that absolutely nobody should have ultimate power, there needs to be checks and balances, the fact of the matter is that the allure of power, especially to individuals as lonely and whatnot as the Metroid hunters are, it's not a surprise in my mind that they would have that type of reaction to it. Reality is, though, with the Alembic system, most of what happened was the result of Goria, and I admit I don't know enough on that one to properly discuss that, but I do know that Goria was the effectively single-handedly responsible for the end of all life in the Alembic system altogether, or at least all sentient life. But then we get to Prime 4. Correction, Prime 3. And we see it 3 separate times within the main game. We see this pride that blinds, this lack of caution being thrown at problems not like time after time after time. On Norian, they find out, oh yeah, our defense systems have been shut down. Cool, no big deal. And you witness, well, let's start with Meta Ridley. Meta Ridley has been infected with Phazon. First time in the entire trilogy at that point that Ridley had Phazon infusion at that point. You can say, okay, whatever, no big deal. But it meant that his pride, his belief that he was the strongest, also meant that he had to rely on someone else's power. Or that someone else believed that they should be at the helm. Now, one of 2 options, either the pursuit of power, which is very much Ridley, is a potential, or the belief that I should be in power, which is, of course, Dark Samus. Again, we see this pattern of people not thinking things through. It doesn't end up being a positive circumstance. Generally speaking, whenever it comes to a pursuit of power in Metroid, it's not positive. Now, once you get to Bryo, you actually hear of a civil war. People focusing on technology, science, and the progress of the Bryonians, and the other side focusing in on their, shall we say, their historical roots. One could not survive without the other, and they end up getting themselves into a civil war that leads to the destruction of their entire civilization. Once again, pride that blinds. And we end up seeing this in a recurring system every single game. Every single civilization, even. So, why all of this? Why does this all come about? I believe in part, that hubris is a, shall we say, a side effect of sentience, of consciousness. If you can consciously make a decision knowing full well that something is going to help you long term, you're gonna do it, or at least you have the predisposition to. And I don't necessarily believe that it's against human nature or even against sentient nature. The idea of being able to make a decision that is beneficial to yourself can lie directly in our earliest everything, really. If we couldn't find food, we couldn't hunt. If we couldn't, make big, sharp, pointy objects, well, we couldn't get our food. So on and so forth. We end up with this recurring cycle where we're trying to pursue power or speed or something to be able to survive as a species. This is no different in the universe of Metroid. It's just significantly farther down the chain. Now, the reason I'm getting to all of this is because it does get a lot muddier. Prime 3, once again, you can see a little bit of hubris being shown in the planet, well, the Space Pirate homeworld. And the Space Pirate homeworld is rather interesting in that its whole dynamic is that the Phazon seed landed, we're not sure how long ago, possibly only about 3 to 6 months earlier. But due to the nature of these space pirates and their lust for power, they end up effectively infecting their entire planet with Phazon, almost like it was ridiculously covered. And you could see the beginnings of what a planet covered in Phazon actually would look like. Again, this pursuit of power, this arrogance, this I can control the uncontrollable, comes up in conversation again. Now, we know by the end of Metroid Prime 3 that Phase and Phazon is destroyed, but its effects are long-lasting, I believe. The reality is that the toxicity, the mutagens that were put out into the system were just, the scars will never truly heal. And, well, Samus was technically able to control Phazon, but Samus was the only person among the individuals trying to control it that feared it, if that makes any sense whatsoever. See, when you look at how the Chozo handled Phazon, they handled it with fear. They didn't want to control it, they wanted to reduce it, they wanted to keep it contained. That's fine. As soon as other entities tried to control it, i.e. the space pirates, Dark Samus, even the other bounty hunters, Rundus, Gore, and Gandreda, they all focused in on trying to control Phazon, and it ultimately led to their downfall as it corrupted their mind, their ability to think freely. And so, again, we have to ask, why was Samus so resilient to it? I think, in part, it was because of Samus's predisposition to be cautious about this substance. See, unlike Gore and Gandreda and Rundus, Samus actually ran into Phazon twice prior. The first time she ran into Phazon, she ran into it on Talon 4. And it was something that was devastating to the environment, devastating to the world as a whole. She saw it as something terrifying, something that should be avoided. But she never actually acted on control until she got the Phazon suit, at which point she was simply aiming to control it in long enough to defeat it. Not indefinite, not harness it, just temporary usage. And so Samus gets away relatively scot-free. The other 3 hunters that we see are consumed by it by the time we see them on their respective planets. Rundus doesn't speak a single word to you. And the only moment that he regains himself is only after he's gotten himself beaten to a pulp by Samus. Even then, his final act was potentially to protect Samus from himself, realizing he couldn't control his actions. Anyway, getting into Prime 4 here, there's kind of two major things we need to talk about. The first is the main villain, and the second being the Lemur. So, let's get into it. Starting with the Lemur, actually. The Lemur had a rather unique circumstance. They developed a means of potentially bringing back forests and their world from the brink of destruction. And it was absolutely fantastic. I would not argue that their decision to try to heal their planet was a bad one. But I will say that they did not fully think things through. See, protocols in science exist for a reason. You want to fully understand what you're working with before you let it loose on the environment. And that's just something that they did not account for in Prime 4's Lemur. See, outside of their general worldview, they had the issue of their planet lacking resources, dying off. And so they sought a means of controlling an energy source that would bring about a spring of life, help the planet rejuvenate itself, effectively create a paradise for all. I'm not against this paradise. I'm not against what they're aiming for. But to me, the relative lack of any data on green energy outside of a single data log that says this brings about a spring of, or a wellspring of life, suggests that it was something that immediately after they witnessed, oh, this is what it does, they used it. And effectively destroyed their entire civilization because of it. Because instead of taking small steps, one at a time, okay, we're going to focus in on this area here, okay, we finished that, let's move to the next one, okay, let's move to the next one. They aimed to create a cannon that would distribute the green energy across the entire planet all at once. And I don't think that's a bad idea. I think mass distribution was a good plan, insofar as if they would have kept their people safe from it. The spring of life that they have witnessed, that they were aiming for, would have made waves in their civilization. It would have made the verdant paradise that they had hoped for. It just wouldn't have had the same effect if they would have taken safety precautions first. If they would have understood what the potential danger of this thing was. They didn't even think about it. They didn't question it. They didn't try to solve anything. They just said, okay, let's do it now. That is the Lemur's greatest weakness. Their greatest failure, if we were. It was pride that blinds. Knowing that what they were doing could have saved their planet. And having enough faith in themselves, they didn't take the necessary precautions in order to resolve it. Now I promised that this was going to be more than just a talk about Lemurn again. The other portion I was getting at was battling Silex. Now Silex is shown in Prime Hunters and Prime 4 as an individual drunk with power. He wants to be the most powerful being in the galaxy. And if not the most powerful being, he at least wants to be able to defeat Samus. I think that is fair, vengeful, but also power hungry. Once again, we fall into that pride that blinds mentality, that arrogance, the belief that I know better. And of course, what better person to throw it on than the main antagonist of the game? His belief that he can control or outright destroy whatever he wants is something that is a terrifying notion, because it effectively means that our big bad evil guy has had it in for us more or less from the word go. And so we end up where the problems that we witness throughout the game could potentially be made worse by the actions of the individuals. Now, backing up with the Prime series, once again, the Phazon problem on Talon 4, the space pirates, in their arrogance, in their blindness, make the problem worse. Prime 3, their Phazon problem, they actively seek out to make it worse. They do the same thing on Brio, they do the same thing on Elysia. Their aim, their drive, their belief in themselves, and their ability to control the uncontrollable means that they never once took the necessary precautions for themselves or the planet that they were on to be able to say, yeah, this is a problem, we need to deal with this. They never once thought twice about what it was that they were doing or why they were doing it. They just said, this could bring us power. We like power, and off they went. They individually made the problem much worse than it ever needed to be, and as a direct result of their actions, caused catastrophic loss of life on multitudes of planets. Not just one, not just two, but in this case, they caused catastrophe on a total of 5 planets in the Metroid Prime trilogy alone, before that they actually solved anything in Prime 3. That is not a group you want in power. This is not a group that should be making decisions, but they are anyways. Now, backing up a little bit to the core franchise, the original, the 2Ds, we actually see a lot of the same problem recur. Starting with the original Metroid, we know that Metroids were created by the Chozo to combat the X. We know this, it is written down and documented. I personally am of the notion of the belief that Metroids were not created but manipulated to be in their current state by the Chozo, not created by them. As their history of what they've accomplished throughout the series more or less focuses in on DNA manipulation, not creation. Okay? With that in mind, they manipulate a predator or a parasite or something that was already capable of defeating the X or keeping balance, if you will, and turn it into something bigger. This something bigger made it noticeable. And so the Federation, in their interest in, we'll call it scientific endeavors, took a shipment of them and tried to take it back to headquarters, believing that they had the means of at least studying this species. Because if they can study it, they can understand it. They understood enough about it that it seemed to metabolize energy of some sort. Energy that was necessary for the function of life, but energy that could not be tangibly seen or scientifically proven, if that made any sense whatsoever. And so, the Metroids and their metabolic processes were something that the Federation was curious about. I can't say that's a bad thing, but it does raise some red flags about the possibility of using them as bioweapons. And I think the fear was always there, because the instant that the space pirates stole the original shipment, they immediately said one of two things. Samus, we need you to either contain, aka capture, or destroy the Metroids on Zebes, because they're a problem. And I don't really see that as a good thing. If they had that in mind from the word go, then there was something bigger at hand. Now, because the space pirates got their hands on it, the Federation made the decision, well, hang on, these easily could be used as bioweapons. Therefore, we are going to eradicate the entire species in Metroid 2. And so Samus goes off and does that, destroys the last of the species as a whole, and voila. But now, because of a lack of an understanding of SR-388's biosphere, shall we say, a lack of understanding of what it was that kept that entire planet's ecology running, you just destroy the entire planet's ecology and the only thing keeping the X-Parasite in check. Once again, arrogance comes into play. This belief that I know better despite not actually knowing all the information. So, cool. Super Metroid comes around. Samus, of course, had saved one Metroid for study. That's what they were intended for to begin with, right? We need to understand more about this species, and that's fine. That's all well and dandy. I don't think that Samus made an improper choice here. She's not playing God. She is trying to understand. Understanding and playing God are two very different circumstances in Metroid. And so, she does what she does, takes the singular Metroid off to the research station, the Ceres colony, and all is good. Or so we think. It is revealed that the space pirates follow Samus from SR-388 to the Ceres colony, kidnap the last Metroid, and Samus repeats her first mission all over again. This time, however, facing off against the space pirates' entire force. This is the end of the space pirates as we understand them, but it is only the beginning of the problems. See, once again, we witness this all-consuming arrogance, this belief that I know better, constantly. And so, the space pirates destroy the last Metroid. Fine, we get it. After the destruction of the last Metroid, Samus is sent on a mission to planet SR-388, the homeworld of the Metroids. And while there, she is infected by an X-Parasite. Now, once again, this entire mission was about research, was about understanding. The ecology of this planet had just been brought back from the brink. Seeing life come back to this planet is a good thing. And so, studying the different species that came back out of it could yield some level of great understanding of the universe, right? That's what this is all about. Understanding. And we come across the X-Parasite. The X-Parasite is again an incredibly dangerous entity, an incredibly dangerous force. And yet, we as the player understand a few things about this. Number one, this beast, this creature, this species, whatever it is capable of killing, replicating, and effectively taking the place of any individual. It's effectively a cloning system. Samus immediately ends up having to have her suit surgically removed because of the biotechnology in her suit. And then given a Metroid vaccine, a vaccine made from the DNA of the last Metroid that was harvested from her suit, presumably. So cool. All is well and good. Except now we're dealing with another issue altogether. The X-Parasite no longer has a predator. because Metroids are gone. The only Metroid left is Samus. And so Samus is sent to the BSL station floating above SR-388 with the intent of figuring out what's going on and possibly shutting down the X-Parasite before it becomes too dangerous. That's the hope, at least. We know, as individuals playing the game, that this is a very bad thing. Now, throughout the course of Metroid Fusion, as I believe it was actually a very story-driven game, Samus witnesses the the X-Parasite in their entire capability. The replication, the memory, like through the replication, their ability to use different memories of the individuals at hand, but more specifically, their ability to augment and evolve over time. This is not a species that is a one-and-done species. This is an ecological disaster, only made worse by the decisions of the Federation. Now, the Federation in Metroid Fusion focus in on two things, or at least that's how it seems. They are focusing on the ecology, they're focusing on the X-Parasite, and they focus very heavily on the SAX. The SAX, of course, is the clone of Samus's armor that was surgically removed from Samus in the interest of preserving the hunter as a whole. I don't mind this. I like this idea of what Samus could be. I like the idea of Samus being a ruthless whatever it is. All of Samus's abilities, none of her humanity. The Federation took a look at this and thought, hang on a moment. This could be a version of Samus that we could possibly point at a problem and see what happens, right? We already point Samus at a problem and Samus solves the problem for us, so what would another of her actually be able to do? We don't actually know. What we do get an understanding of is that with the SAX infusion, by the end of the game, there are 10 separate SAX running around the facility. Which means not only does it have Samus's instinct, her abilities, her suit, her drive, her memory, but the SAX also replicates infinitely. Meaning that given enough time, you don't need to have a military anymore. Because Samus is capable of being an entire military. The issue becomes, how do you control it? And I don't really think that the Federation actually thought that far, but they did think far enough that they were attempting to kill the original, believing that the SAX could fill the place of the bounty hunter. I personally think that was probably one of their dumbest things that they could have possibly done, but the point of the matter is that hubris, this belief in power, this arrogance, this pride that blinds, is constant in this world. This belief that they know better and are unwilling to hear or see reason is exactly why the Metroid universe is in such dire straits constantly. And if it weren't for the fact that Samus exists, the entire universe would have been destroyed, well, at this point in the video, 9 times over. But it gets worse, because we deal with Metroid Dread. Now, Dread deals with 3-ish problems. The first being the Federation's Emmys, the second being Ravenbeak and the remaining Chozo, and the third being Samus herself. Now, getting too far into the, or without getting too far into this, the Emmy was sent out to planet ZDR with the hope of understanding what the ecology was on the planet, whether or not the X parasite actually existed. These machines were near perfect, indestructible entities capable of handling virtually anything you could throw at them. They were, and to this day are, the most powerful entities we have faced pretty much ever in Metroid. And they were immediately taken over and given a different outcome by Ravenbeak. Ravenbeak saw this technology and thought, I have a use for this, and it's absolutely perfect. We can use it immediately to harness the power of the Metroid, believing that the Metroid DNA residing within Samus had the capability to provide a new super soldier, a new army, or rather power to a new army that could usurp the galaxy. I know I don't fully recall what Ravenbeak's entire plan was, but it doesn't take much to understand that that is an arrogant, rage-filled, pride-filled belief. Everything that he did, everything that they had done to that point, was effectively a poor decision. Was potentially going to destroy a planet or the galaxy as a whole. Which brings me to Samus. Up until this point in time, Samus has been, theoretically, the voice of reason. We see in the first Metroid that she had taken the option of eradicating the Metroids in the Turian zone of Zebes. We saw that she opted to indoctrinate and hopefully study an infant Metroid, which had imprinted on her. It was effectively a safe individual. Fine. I'm okay with that as a whole. Third, the use of her power, shall we say, to stop the space pirates from using that infant Metroid and cloning it. Cool. Absolutely. All of this points to Samus being the voice of reason. Samus destroying the planet, or the BSL station above SR388. Samus is the voice of reason. Metroid Prime, Samus focuses in on destroying the Phazon occupation. Prime 2 focuses on fixing the planet so that at the end of the day, even if the Luminoth do end up dying out because of a lack of population, they're not witnessing the end of the universe as a result. Prime 3 saves not one, not two, but 4 planets, and stops the spread of Phazon altogether from its source. Again, a voice of reason, a voice of caution, when caution was thrown to the wind on numerous occasions throughout Prime 3 and really its entire history. Prime 4, Samus, focusing exclusively on helping people, focusing in on the ability to pass on the knowledge of the Lamorne from one generation, one planet to the next. It's no surprise then that Samus is the voice of reason. But I don't think that's a forever thing. Now, we're going to get a little bit into speculation territory. Metroid Ravenous. I'm sure if you don't know about the game or the leak that came out not too long ago, there is another presumably 2D Metroid in the works. And it is given the nickname Ravenous, which suggests that we are dealing with Samus and her potential power as the last Metroid. Now, Without going too far into it, I do not believe that this game actually needs a villain because Samus herself is the villain, if that makes any sense whatsoever. This character that we've now played as for 9 to 11 games, depending on your perspective on the one that we do not name, Samus is an incredibly versatile, very capable, very dangerous entity to have, both for you and against you. And so, it is believed, at least by myself and a lot of the community, that Samus will be the villain of the next Metroid game, because she will be attempting or trying to learn how to control the Metroid side of her DNA. Control. This is a matter of many things, actually. I don't believe that this is purely hubris, but I do believe that this is... Samus could either be learning to control that side of herself, or seeking a way to eradicate that side of herself. Now, I don't know which that's going to end up being. If she tries to harness the Metroid side, then she may likely end up being a bane of multiple planets, ecosystems, environments, which, let's be real, if you have a problem, you send Samus at it. But the alternative, the one I am most afeared of, is whether or not Samus is trying to eradicate the Metroid in her DNA. See, if we go at the latter, that could theoretically mean that she does not want to be what she is at this point in time, and she may actively seek out ways of either destroying, like ripping apart and pinpointing bits of DNA, or she may end up trying to live in isolation. Both options are technically reasonable. I personally hope that Samus keeps to what she is. I don't believe that she should have to change who she is, but I also believe that if she doesn't want to be manipulated or used by other entities throughout the universe of Metroid, that there's got to be some level of something that gives. So, with that being said, that's more or less it. The universe of Metroid would be safer if there were more checks and balances, more scientific inquiry, less lust or thirst for power. And the reality is that the sole voice of reason may very quickly become its greatest offender. So, tell me what you think. Because honestly, this to me makes the most sense out of anything that could possibly be theorized with Metroid. It feels like there's... It feels as though, to me, that there are many ways that it could be interpreted. Arrogance, power, whatnot. But it all more or less boils down to if it is sentient, if it has a conscience, if it has any concept of power, then chances are it's going to be the most dangerous thing in the universe. And the belief is that left unchecked, these individuals, these things that have caused or been involved in any capacity, will lead to far greater destruction than what the things they are trying to either prevent or control would be capable of on their own. Oh, wow, that was a lot to say in a very short span of time. Anyways, now that we've got that all out of the way, I'm assuming you've seen thus far that we finished the Ice Belt region and are collecting a bunch of side quest items. Namely, we're getting the Viola IC and the Ice Shot, although being realistic about it, the Viola and Ice Shot are just stepping stones to the next region. And so we will be, ideally speaking, reaching Flare Pool next week with another potentially groundbreaking or ridiculous question in mind. Which Samus is the strongest? And I think we already know which one that is, to some extent, but it'd be interesting to question, where do they all stack up? I have theories, but I have nothing concrete as of yet. These spinning guys are a bit much sometimes. Like, they're a cool concept, but I always find that I miss the shot, or I end up sending my shot through one of the little drones, and it just causes me way too much frustration. But this was actually the enemy that defeated me for the first time in my original run. Don't know why. I don't necessarily think it's an overly powerful entity, but I do recall that it was something that I could not get a grip on how to land the shot against it properly, and that ended up leading to the first death in the original game. Or in my original run. There we go. And you know, it makes me question, with how much goes haywire in the Metroid franchise, how much of this conversation could be applied to other games? Like, I don't think that it's out there to assume that the conversation around a character or a group of characters' mentality around power is necessarily a bad thing. Like, realistically speaking, if you wanted to talk about Bowser's relationship to power, there'd be really, I mean, there wouldn't be much there to talk about. He seeks it out, he gets his butt kicked, move on kind of thing, but you do get a lot of that type of conversation, especially where it comes to Nintendo games and their overall design and villain philosophy. Okay. Did that do it? Yes! Cool, I got two at once. Alright, now that's done, let's get the heck out of here and to Fury Green. One thing that I do like about Prime 4's backtracking is it's very intentional. Like, when you look at Prime 1's backtracking, when you got to the bottom of the Phazon Mines, you needed a new tool to be able to get through the top or the bottom of the Phazon Mines towards... Correction. Bottom of the Phazon Mines, you get the power bombs. Top of the Phazon Mines, you get the X-ray visor. You need the power bombs to get the X-ray visor. You need the X-ray visor to get anywhere past the power bombs. So you end up going from the top to the bottom to the top to the bottom. And it's a lot of needless, senseless backtracking that does do a lot of padding in the late game. Prime 4, while it has padding in the form of the desert as a whole, every time I went from one region to the next, it was very deliberate. My first time going through Fury Green is the first time through Fury Green. The first time going back through Fury Green after getting the fire shot, you go through, you collect everything, there's only one item left that is unattainable, aside from your basic visits to and from Fury Green. You need the ice shot for one, you need the electric shot for another, or thunder shot, and that's it. Sorry, ice shot, thunder shot, and then the third item you need is the power bombs, and you've completed Fury Green. By the time you go back to Ice Belt for the first time, you have everything you need to 100% complete ice belt. And at that point, you can go from one region to the next, to the next, to the next, and clean out everything outside of a couple small odds and ends, virtually your first return visit to each region. It's very condensed, but it is also incredibly... It's condensed but consistent. And I gotta say, that does feel nice to be able to say, oh yeah, the devs actually thought about how you would approach this problem. How they would approach backtracking, because that's kind of a point of contention for the Metroid franchise as a whole. Anywho, with all of this said and done, if you like what you see, I would love if you left a like, a subscribe, a comment down below. I would love to see it. Until next time, I hope you all have a good one.
Hello, friend. Okay, analysis first. Oh, this is fascinating. It looks like this program inverts the energy emitted from the device. That means if I reprogram this and set it into your arm cannon, you should be able to use a new shot type. Now you can use Ice Shot. It temporarily freezes the target when hit. You can freeze living organisms to stop their movement. And you should be able to use it on high temperature objects like magma to freeze it for a short period of time by lowering its surface temperature. If you find anything else, bring it into me. I'm sure I can turn it into something useful.